Bonhams is honored to offer the Lauren Bacall Collection at auction. I was privileged to have had the chance to meet and work with Lauren Bacall over the past 5 years and to very intimately get to know her collection and her collecting style. Within the vast collection, which numbers over 740 items, we find at least a dozen different collecting categories. And the sheer scope and depth of the collection is truly amazing. Upon meeting her, I had an initial question for her. Who was the interior designer that she worked with? I was amazed to find that she had no interior designer that she worked with. This was completely her own style. And I asked her over the years kind of why she collected what she did. And she said that there were two things that she looked for in an object. Whether it was a painting, a piece of jewelry, or whatever, it had to have character. It had to have honesty. It had to be what it was trying to be. And if it had those two things, and if it kind of spoke to her, she would buy it. And she never bought because of value or because of name brand or anything like that. She would buy just as easily in a thrift shop as the biggest gallery in the world. And what was very interesting is walking from room to room over 5 years, and I can say I logged in many miles in that apartment. Every trip I saw something new that I hadn't noticed before. And over the years we found that many items had personal stories to them and personal interest to her. One such example was the Henry Fonda print of the three hats. And I found that that hat, the three hats, were actually hats that Henry Fonda wore in the movie On Golden Pond. The hat on the far right was one that was given to Henry Fonda on the first day of shooting by Katharine Hepburn. That hat in particular had been Spencer Tracy's lucky hat. She loved the idea of, and we talked about this pretty frequently, she loved the concept of artistic genius and the fact that an artist was able to have a concept in their mind and then successfully transform that into a three-dimensional object. Lauren Bacall had a very special relationship with Henry Moore. She first became aware of his work in the 1950s in Los Angeles through Mildred Jaffe, the wife of Humphrey Bogart's agent. Years later, in the 1970s, she had the chance to meet him. She wrote a letter to Henry Moore after their first meeting saying, in effect, that the meeting was a highlight of her life. Basically, she was starstruck by him and he of her. With these sculptures, she loved to touch them and run her hands over them. She loved the smooth quality, the flowing lines. She loved everything about them. Schlumberger was a designer who worked for Tiffany, but rather than go to Tiffany's and purchase there, she believed in going directly to the source. So she would buy Schlumberger jewelry in Paris. These bracelets here are Schlumberger, and as you can see in the photograph, she frequently wore both at the same time on the same wrist. One interesting item that we uncovered was when we were doing the inventory process, we came across a print in the hallway, and it was by an artist named Ted Kay. No one knew who Ted Kay was until we actually looked at the pencil inscription on the print and realized it was actually Senator Ted Kennedy. And this particular colorful print of daffodils was one that was done after a painting that he painted for his wife Vicky, which he presented to her on their wedding day. Subsequently, Ted made a print of this painting and gave it to close friends, and this particular piece was inscribed directly from Ted and Vicky to Lauren Bacall. Lauren Bacall was very fond of the sculpture of Robert Graham. Robert Graham was actually married to Angelica Houston, the actress and daughter of Jon Houston, the director. And in fact, she had 3 standing figures that we're offering in the auction, Christine, Alyssa, and Gabrielle. They stood in the entry to the apartment, and she always referred to those as her girls, and she loved them. The world is well aware of Lauren Bacall, the great actress. What they aren't really completely aware of is Lauren Bacall, the serious collector. And Bonhams is very pleased to be able to show this side of her character to the public at large. Because Lauren Bacall's fan base is truly international, we've taken many of these highlights on tour to Hong Kong, Tokyo, Miami, Paris, London, Los Angeles, before the final auction in New York on March 31st and April 1st.